How did you go about learning the local language? And well, I've got quite an experience with Papua New Guinea now. I've been working there for about 16 or 17 years and decided that I was going to do my OE like most people do. And I spent quite a bit of time when I first arrived just coming to terms with the culture and learning the language. Luckily, they have a lingua franca that is like a, a language that's used between the 800 different languages in Papua New Guinea, so people can communicate with one another. And and so I first learned Tok Pisin, the lingua franca, and from there I went on to learn the indigenous local language of the people that I was working with. You need to know certain words. You can pick up on language pretty quickly, and it's taken me probably 6 or 7 years to get vaguely fluent in the local language. We hear that you've had contracted malaria. What was the experience like? Pretty horrible. I wouldn't recommend it. The first time I got malaria, I decided to wait it out in the house that I was living in. It was really curious because during the daytime you just feel exhausted, but at night you suffer from massive sweats. The second time I got it, I should have evacuated myself, but I ended up taking myself to an aid post where there wasn't really any medicine and trying to tough it out. And during that period, I got really pretty sick. I lost a lot of weight in a week, and my kidneys started to shut down. Couldn't process the water that was in my body. It was a horror story. Malaria is really interesting because the indigenous people, the people in Papua New Guinea and these coastal regions where malaria is really strong, develop a resistance to it. And so when my friends would come up to me and they'd look a bit under the weather, or they looked like they had a cold or were slightly unwell, I'd say, "Oh, what's wrong with you?" And they'd say, "Oh, I've got malaria." When I first started trying to shoot What Lies That Way back in 2010, I went over there to do a bit of research and to talk to some of these shaman. The cinematographer I took with me at that time, he contracted malaria, and in the end I evacuated him because it's really hard to work in the month that after you're recovering from malaria. Having been through that process myself, I thought it's better if he doesn't have to go through it. Yeah, 5 years later we went back to shoot the film. After your experience, how has it changed your life? That is the experience, I guess, of going into the shaman initiation. To become a Buai means that you can communicate with spirits, mostly ancestral spirits, more directly. Those communications come through dreams. And when you're a Buai, you're able to have those communications on a nightly basis. And those materials that you get from the spirit realm every night can be translated, if you like, into creative materials. Now, the luck people that I live and work with, they use those creative materials to make music and dance. A number of people said, "Oh, Paul, you'll be able to use the Buai for other things as well as music and dance. You can use it to make films or to write books or whatever it is that white men do." Going through the Buai process and initiating into that shamanistic practice has opened my mind to different things. There's no point in going into the practice with a skeptical mind. The idea is to go in with a very open mind and try and be open to the experience that I was undertaking. At first I tried to take notes, trying to make an account of what was going on, but in the end I dismissed all of that, and for the last kind of 3 days of the initiation I just let the experience kind of wash over me. With food and water deprivation, were you afraid for your life? And I did quite a bit of research on what severe hydration does to your body before I went through the initiation. And I knew that certain things would happen. And I always had the safety valve of whenever I was uncertain, I could pull the plug on the whole initiation. Partly I was convinced that it was possible to do this because I knew that the people there had done it. In fact, not many have. Coming out of the initiation after having survived 4 days, 5 nights with no food and no water, a number of young men came up to me and said to me that they'd tried to go through the initiation and given up after 2 or 3 days. There are only about 3 or 4 living shaman of this particular Buai practice. I didn't ever feel afraid for my life. Always felt that if I needed to, I could pull the plug. Not only had I ingested a whole bunch of substances after 24 hours of the initiation that were psychoactive, there was also the fact that after sleeping for 3 or 4 days, your brain starts to dream while you're awake. Pretty unreal. But you have moments where you're kind of in the space and in the, I guess, everybody else's reality. And there were also many moments where I felt myself to be traveling and elsewhere, physically and mentally. When did you start to get in the powers of the Buai's shamanic ritual, and what were they like? That's a difficult one to explain. Prior to going through the initiation into this shamanic practice, I always thought of dreams as a sort of your brain cognating facts from the day and jumbling stuff together. Now I see them in different terms as sort of a creative mind, something that can be used for the purposes of being creative.